Kevin, if you can start recording the meeting, thank you.
Good afternoon, Kevin. All right, Andrew.
Yes, we go ahead, Chair.
Good afternoon, all. Can I welcome all members and officers to the meeting of the Development Control Committee, which is due to the government's advice to practice social distancing. And this should be via... Oh, somebody knocking the door. My grandson's there. Sorry about that. This should be a virtual Development Control Committee meeting. This meeting is being recorded and be available via the Council's website reviewed following the meeting. If during the meeting a technical error occurs within the transmission which cannot be resolved within a reasonable period of time, then the meeting will be closed and the remaining business will be deferred to a subsequent meeting of the Development Control Committee on a date to be determined and notified by way of the publication of the agenda on the Council's website. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting from remote locations. Please could everyone ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will receive the electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking will switch up their cameras at this point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you can keep your cameras and microphones switched off. And this will help to minimize any background noise and interference to ensure that connection remains stable as possible. If any members or officers wish to raise a point or a question, they should use the instant messaging IM icon in the bottom left of the Skype window and simply type speak, and I will come to you in order I receive your request. Please do not use your microphones until I invite you to do so. In the event the committee requires to vote on any item of business or at the meeting, I will announce that these members of the committee have 20 seconds to vote by typing in against or abstain the instant messaging icon. I will then ask the legal officer to announce the decision by the committee. The meeting will be supported by the planning and highways officers and a legal officer of the Democratic Services, who will be supporting the committee, who will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and where necessary will mute those not being used. Before the events commence, I will now ask the officer for the Democratic Service to announce the names of the councillors in attendance to this meeting. I would also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should also ensure mics and cameras are switched off when not in use. Andrew, would you like to go through, please?
Yes, proud members, good afternoon, members. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Andrew Rees, Democratic Services Manager, and the members in attendance at the meeting today are Councillor Gary Thomas, Chair, Councillor Amanda Williams, Councillor Caroline Webster, Councillor Keith Edwards, Councillor James Radcliffe, Councillor John Spanswick, Councillor John Blundell, Councillor Kenneth Watts, Councillor Mike Kern, Councillor Nicole Burnett, Councillor Richard Collins, Councillor Richard Granville, Councillor Ross Sturman, Councillor Sorrel Dendy and Councillor Matthew Boise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Could we have apologies for absence, please? Andrew, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors David Lewis and Janice Lewis. Thank you, Chair.
Any other members or officers, please? Jonathan, is he there? Andrew? Andrew?
Yes, Chair. Jonathan is not present here today, so it'll be Rodri who will be taking the reports this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Right. Any declaration of interest, please? Members and officers, anyone? Thank you. Could I have the approval of the minutes, please, on the 23rd of December 2020? Move on a second, please.
Formally move, Chair.
Second.
All in favour?
Yeah.
Thank you. We got no public speakers, Andrew? Andrew?
No, Chair, we have no public speakers this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Could I have a move of the amendment sheet, please?
Move. Second.
All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Number 6, the amendment control guidelines. Is there anything on that, please? Nothing? Right on. Number 7, please. Land west of Maesteg Road, Tondee. Rodney, please.
Thanks, Chair. For the benefit of the recording, my name is Roger Davis, Development and Building Control Manager. Good afternoon, members. We have this item on the agenda, and in the meantime, the applicant has requested that we withdraw this application from today's agenda in lieu with the expectation that it be reported back to the 17th of September committee. In order to allow time to resolve some of the outstanding highways matters that would have been the subject of conditions on the reserved matters approval. So we're hoping in the meantime those matters will be resolved, so that would be a cleaner decision and recommendation put before you at the next planning committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, we go on to item 8 now. Parcel of land R20 Park Durban County. Phil, please.
Chair, for the benefit of the recording, you should move, have a move and seconder for deferral of
Chair,
that.
can I formally move that we defer it to the September meeting?
Second.
I'll second that.
All in favour?
Yes.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
So much. Anyone else? Right. So we'll go back to item 8 now. Parcel of land R20 Park Durban County. Phil, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Phil Thomas. I'm a Principal Planning Officer, and I was the officer that dealt with this particular application. Members will recall that this item was brought to their attention at the last meeting of the Development Control Committee on the 23rd of July, but it was deferred with the request that the applicant company provide some detailed assessment of open space provision for the wider Park Derwent development, and for officers to draft an additional planning condition that would tie the delivery of the housing of this phase to the provision of a local equipped area of play on the adjacent site. Members have in the report a copy of the original report. If I could draw your attention at the start to condition 5 on the report, but actually condition 5 on the amendment sheet. Members, we've slightly tightened up the wording of condition 5, and that is the condition that members asked us to include within the permission, which is tying the delivery of the housing site here to the provision of a local equipped area of play, as I said, on the adjacent site. In the report at page 71, members will note a response from the Managing Director of Persimmon Homes to the deferment. He details the discussions that are currently taking place with the Council regarding the agreement of 4 play areas across the site. An indication that those 4 play areas will be constructed between September and November this year. He has indicated that will be dependent on the company receiving timely responses from the Council's officers in terms of the agreement of those schemes. The response from Persimmon Homes also seeks to demonstrate that this scheme is compliant with our policies. They've identified that some 8.69 hectares of open space should be required for the number of houses that are proposed on Park Derwent, and in their calculations they've indicated that some 8.9 hectares of equipped playing pitches and informal open spaces provided on the site, which it exceeds that, and that doesn't include added within that retained areas of woodlands and landscaping on the northwest and south of the site. In total, that would take it up to some 21 hectares. The response goes on to say that when we consider this particular application, we should be mindful of the Fields in Trust guidance for outdoor sport and play, and that the actual development of R20 is well located in respect to that guidance. It is within 1,200 metres of playing pitches, 400 metres of an equipped area of play, that being on 10A, and with 100 metres within 100 metres of informal play space. To this end, the Persimmon representative maintains that the application is compliant with Policy Com 1 of the adopted plan, and that is our view. Just briefly going back to the application then, it's 102 dwellings and it's a mix of house types on 4 hectares of land. It's a full application because the actual total number of units on this site will exceed the ceiling on Park Derwent by 68. The application was accompanied by transport assessment. The report before you members provides a description of the development with the reference to the Park Derwent development brief. Key features to note are the well-defined building line along the site frontage, the use of landmark buildings, the use of rain gardens as part of the site's sustainable drainage system, and the retained hedgerow along the southern boundary of the site. I draw members' attention to the consultation responses received, but also the objections from local residents and the Community Council, which are summarised on page 71 of the report. Given the policy context and the representations received, the key issues for members to consider are also set out on page 77. And the report considers those each in turn and concludes that the land use in policy terms is acceptable. In general, site infrastructure can accommodate the uplift in numbers, albeit the development will be required to contribute to school places, and the level of contribution is set out in the terms of the required Section 106 obligation. Furthermore, the open space allocation for the whole site accords with policy. In design terms, the layout accords with the requirements of the Park Derwent Design Code, although it has required a number of changes to achieve compliance. The relationship of the development to existing properties has been examined, and members will note that it is compliant in terms of the level of garden space provided for the new units and the new occupiers of the new property, as well as safeguarding the amenity of existing residents. In terms of biodiversity, the main interest lies in the on-site vegetation. While some trees and hedges will be removed to accommodate the development, the important hedgerow feature on the southern boundary will be retained. The Council's obligations under Section 6 of the Environment Act should not be compromised by this development. Members, the recommendation before you is that permission should be granted subject to the applicant entering into Section 106 obligation, the terms of which are set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Can I have a move and a seconder, please, for the recommendation?
Move recommendation, Chair.
Second. Sorry, Chair. Second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Hi, can you hear me? For some reason my video's not working for some reason, I don't know. But can you hear me okay?
Yeah, Councillor, yeah. You're all right, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to say that I'm pleased that they've added the condition in about the play parks. I'll eat my hat if I see it. They do actually build them in September and October, because if you speak to parks, they've been waiting for over 2 years for the necessary documentation for them to complete the play park that they're already halfway through. So I can't see them doing that if they're asking for our officers to respond to them in a timely manner. Our officers have been waiting for over 2 years for them to come back with the required information for the play parks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I got no more speakers. You all in favour of the recommendation?
Sorry,
Formally moved, Chair.
Councillor Voisey wants to speak as well.
Yes, Chair. Councillor Voisey is indicated, please.
No, he's just come up, man. Too quick for you. Right, Councillor Voisey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to just recall at the previous meeting, this is all about timing, if I remember, that this is a new application that is to piggyback the existing application, but is new because of a change in the total numbers. So it's a completely new application from our point of view. If that could just be clarified, and that the play areas are, if the other developments weren't happening, this would have to have a play area of its own. And I do, despair that we are constantly having to push developers to deliver on what they promise. Clearly, the play area and everything is not money making, so it's the least of their priorities. So I do have some great sympathy with the local member over whether this will actually be delivered. And all I really need to know from the planning officers, is it watertight, and can they wriggle out of actually delivering what they've promised or not? Because clearly, we want them to keep their word. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bosie. Phil, please, could you come back in?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Fair questions. It's a new it's a full application. I think most of the applications thus far on Park Down have been what we call reserve matters application. They've been strictly in accordance with the outline planning consent. You're right. This is a full application because the outline planning consent had a ceiling on the number of units that they could put on the development, and that exceeds that. Now we've gone through an exercise of checking whether the infrastructure can accommodate their additional number of units, which is additional 68 above the top figure, and the view taken from a transport, drainage, and the usual, matters that are important from infrastructure. Yes, it can be accommodated. So it's a full application. You're right. It's considered against all our policies afresh. But we've also got to consider it in the context of where it is. It is within an existing larger housing estate, which has generous provision of open space and not play-equipped areas at the moment, as the local members highlighted. They haven't delivered all the play areas. And on that point, we're using this planning permission as almost a belt and braces approach to deliver a play area that is closest to the site. There is other mechanisms outside of this planning application, i.e. the original outline permission and the legal agreement that ties Persimmon to do works within different phases of the development. And I think there's an acknowledgement that they've slipped on that. And at the end of the day, it is within our we have the ability as a local planning authority to pursue that. So what we're doing here today is belt and braces. We're tying this permission to the delivery of that play area. As the representative of Persimmon Homes has said, they consider what they're doing is to be compliant because there are going to be play areas close to this particular development. So I hear what you're saying. In its own right, it stood alone without the context of development around it. Yes, quite rightly, probably there would be the requirement for open space and play equipment. But we've got to see this in the wider context of Park Derwent, where the provision is more generous. Wriggle out? No, I don't think there is a wriggle out. Developers will sometimes wriggle out of requirements, but as I said, just going back to that point, there is the legal agreement that covered the original Park Derwent development, and there will be this planning condition that we can enforce should the developer not provide that play area. In terms of what the local member says, you're right. There has been a delay in the delivery of the equipped play areas. I took a trip to the site between the last meeting of committee and today, and I can only see one equipped play area. There may be others, but I could only see one equipped play area. So I think there's a recognition on the developer's part that they have been remiss in that respect, and I think there is a genuine desire to do this. They are. We've emails, Rodri and I have had emails this week from the developers saying they are desperately trying to get a meeting with the parks officers to agree to sign off the latest schemes for these 4 play areas they've talked about. And we're going to try and broker that meeting over the next few weeks to try and smooth that process through so those schemes can be agreed. And there's a 5-week lead-in time before they actually, once they had agreed and the instructor contracted to do the work. So I think it may slip a little bit, but I think there's a desire on their part, Persimmon now, to deliver those play areas in the light of members' concerns that have been expressed through this planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Spancic, please.
Sorry, Chair. I wanted.
You want to come back, will you?
So yeah, as something that was said, I wanted to ask the legal officer. Whenever we consider planning applications, we're told we must only consider what's in front of us. Now, what we're doing is considering that, because this is a whole application in its own right. The fact that there are other developments with these facilities doesn't exclude they're there or potentially there, but we have to decide on this application on what's in front of us and assume that the rest of it's green fields. Is that correct or not? Because we're always told we have to decide on what's in front of us and put aside everything else. Now, if that's the case, that we got to think. Sometimes I know there's already applications approved and they have amendments, but in this case they're asking for more. So if we don't approve it, and I'm not saying that that's the case, they could still build, but within the original permissions. So we really do need to hammer this down, because I am fearful that they'll use the excuse of other areas not to do something here when they should be doing. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, Chair. No, it's not. It's not the case that you've got to consider that everything around was a green field, Councillor. What you've got to do, and what I think the report does in great detail, is look at the context of this application, but within the surrounding area. And as you say, this is, if you like, almost the last phase of a very major development in Bridgend. And as I understand the report, and Phil will correct me if I'm wrong, but the provision of play area is sufficient for the fact that the extra housing, which leads this to be a full application, I've forgotten the exact number of units, but it doesn't require any more play area provision. That's the advice the officers are giving you in the report. So it's perfectly proper to consider that in the context of a decision you've got to make.
Thank you.
I can't really add to that, Chair.
Yeah, that's clear as that. But I'm just concerned about, all these interlayered applications becomes confusing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spanzik, please.
Thank you, Chair. I share the concerns expressed by the ward member in relation to this developer, because I think it's unfair for them to try and put the blame partly now on the Parks Department not being able to respond. Our Parks Department isn't resilient after cuts for many years, but the developer could and should have provided facilities long before this year or last year, and I think we perhaps maybe need to tighten up our conditions in the future to make sure any facilities are provided before the 20th, the 30th, the 50th, whatever else it is, and that be enforced. We've fallen down a bit, perhaps with the County Borough Council there, but not enforcing things. If we could enforce things, we now left where we are. But this condition hopefully will make that work on this occasion. But it can't be just down to one or two officers in the Parks Department holding it up, when this developer, in my experience, is well known for holding things up and not providing the facilities. And another example is in the report, which is perhaps from a planning point of view in the future we need to change. It mentions on the page 74 about litter bins, where the community council were trying to get litter bins, and it's quickly passed to a problem between the developer and our highways. Well, when we have developments built, the developer needs to pay for the infrastructure that community and that development needs, and that includes litter bins and grit road salt bins. It's no good leaving them out of planning and expecting the council to pick up the bill later, because that's what we end up doing, to fusing the road. The council and the council taxpayer then has to supplement private developers by providing the community facilities that should have been provided on day one. That's something we need to change from a planning point of view. But I agree with the ward member, and we need to be very careful, because this developer will not build the players this year. The time the plans are agreed and equipment ordered will be into October, November, wet weather. They will not be able to lay safety surface in the wet weather, so it will be the spring next year. It will be the very earliest any players will materialise on this site. I'm prepared to put money on that. I'm not a betting man.
Thank you, John. Thanks for your comments. Phil, will you come back at some of these points, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, note the point from Councillor Spanswick and again from the local member. I don't think there's any doubt there's been slippage on the part of the developers here, and it is right not to point the finger you know, at the parks officers and lay the blame there. That is unreasonable to do that. All I can really say, since the spring of this year, they are actively engaging with us, possibly mindful that this planning application was going to be in front of members at some point, but they are engaging with us to agree those schemes for those sites. And all right, I will take that in good faith on the developers that they are looking to do that. In terms of slippage, what Councillor Spanswick said, yes, we're not going into the best time to deliver playgrounds because we're going into potentially worse weather and other constraints to sort of on-site works. But I think what we've got through this planning permission is a means of securing the local equipped area of play closest to this development, addressing some of the concerns that Councillor Voisey said, that they will have play close to this particular development. And I think what we can give members, or what we can do for members, is review the situation from our own perspective in terms of what the outline planning consent says in terms of delivery of playgrounds across the site. And if there is an issue of slippage, using the mechanisms for enforcement to deal with that. And we will watch the situation closely, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. You want to join me answer?
Thank you, Chair. In future, we need to discuss about litter bins and other infrastructure items, which is not just this development and this application, it's across the board. It needs sorting.
Thank you, John. I got no more speakers. Anyone else like to speak, please? Are you all in favour?
I'll formally move, Chair.
Second?
Second.
Aye. Thank you very much. Item 9 on the agenda.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to come back in before item 9. The committee was agreed with the recommendation.
Yeah, they did, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Rod. Number 9, Local Development Plan, Revised Delivery Agreement. Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. For the purposes of recording, my name is Gareth Denning and I'm the Strategic Planning Policy Team Leader. Right, the next item on the agenda concerns the necessary revisions to the LDP delivery agreement, and it's essentially to give members a heads up of a report very similar to this one that will be going to full council in September. So essentially the delivery agreement is the contract that the council enters into with the Welsh Government, which explains how the LDP will be replaced and crucially the timetable for how the various stages within that will be reached, when they'll be reached. And it also includes a community involvement scheme which sets out who, when and how the council will consult and engage with various stakeholders throughout the process. And the original delivery agreement was signed in June 2018, and paragraph 3.4 of the report bullet points the considerable progress that the development plans team has made in getting the LDP to the position it is in now. However, progress towards the next stage has been delayed by the COVID-19 pandemic, and namely that's going out to consult on a deposit plan. In fact, we should be out to consult now, July and August 2020, but obviously that has been put back, and that's the reason we need to put in a revised delivery agreement. So the council received a letter in July 2020, 7th of July, from Welsh Government, anticipating the need for all local authorities, in fact, to submit a revised delivery agreement in light of the pandemic. And so they also asked for planning authorities to undertake almost a sense check of the work they've done so far in light of the pandemic. Now, officers have undertaken that exercise. It's attached at Appendix 1 for noting. I'm not going to dwell on it at this moment in time. There's no specific need for that. It's for members' information. But what that piece of work has shown is that we've gone back and reviewed the preferred strategy. We've reviewed the LDP vision, the various issues and objectives that we've set out that the LDP needs to address. And the conclusion that we've come to is basically that the LDP is very much still relevant. The work that we've done is very much relevant, and that the points that we're seeking to address within the LDP, if anything, a lot of them have become more emphasised by the pandemic. So rather than pause or stop work on the plan, officers feel that it's very much the case that work on a replacement LDP is more pressing than possibly it was before. At 4.4 of the report, I've indicated the changes to the revised delivery agreement, or the proposed changes to the revised delivery agreement. So the document in full is also appended, but what I've done is included the main changes that we're looking to include, so members don't have to flick between the report and the appendices. The key changes are to the timetable, and that is illustrated in the report. So stages 1 to 3 are essentially complete. Stage 4 is where we'll see the change, and that's basically concerning the deposit LDP. And what we're looking to do is to hold the consultation on the deposit in January and March of next year, 2021. So essentially what we're looking at is a 6-month delay. The stages following the deposit plan are indicative at this stage because it's very much then over to external agencies to determine the dates that follow, because the stage after the deposit is to submit the plan to the Welsh Government. So we don't know yet what the dates will follow, but if we follow it through, what we're looking at is adoption in spring 2022. So that's that 6-month delay I was speaking about earlier. The other point to note with the timetable is that when we go out to consult on the deposit LDP, legislation dictates that we should hold a 6-week consultation period. But what we're proposing to include is an 8-week period between January and March next year, just to provide people, all members of the community and various stakeholders of the LDP, more time to provide their views on the plan and to account for any restrictions that we are still likely to be faced with in terms of social distancing at that time. The other major change to the delivery agreement is detailed in 4.6. and that concerns the methods of engagement that we're likely to require with various stakeholders. And what we've included there is just various alternative methods that we may need to use, and that includes the use of meetings like this one, virtual meetings as opposed to meetings in person. It may be the case that we can have smaller focus meetings with members concerning a specific topic, or ward-based areas on the deposit plan, and we can extend that to community councils as well. There'll be the need to consider greater use of social media, and for those of you who follow the BCBC Twitter feed this week, you'll have noticed that Richard has been doing a question and answer session on there regarding the LDP. There'll be greater emphasis possibly on the use of our own website, but also acknowledging that some people haven't got internet access. One of the things that officers will look to do is possibly have one-to-one telephone conversations where we can advertise the fact in advance and set aside time where officers are purely devoted to just picking up the phone and talking to people on a one-to-one basis. There may also still be the need to hold public exhibitions, of course. The traditional method of officers standing in a library or a community hall may not be appropriate going forward, but there still may be the possibility of using larger venues, or alternatively having drop-in sessions, so that basically officers can be in a venue at a set time and people book a time to go and talk to those officers. It's all basically geared towards ensuring that we know how many people will be attending and at what time, to provide us with more certainty and to provide members of the community with the confidence that they can attend such a venue, knowing that there'll be no there'll be no reason to be concerned to do so. And another potential method we may use, we use planning aid in the consultation on the preferred strategy. It may be that we use external agencies or internal agencies to help engagement going forward. So the recommendation is at paragraph 9. myself and Adam are on this call. If there are any questions we can answer now, then I'm pleased to do so.
Thank you, Gareth. Councillor Jean-Paul Belair, please.
Thank you, Chair. It has come up as Carolyn went first on my way, so if she wants to go first, just in case I have nicked her question.
No, you carry on, John.
Okay, that's fine. My question is, you spoke about how you're going to extend the period of consultation from 6 to 8 weeks. Is there a little bit of flexibility in that, just in case we do go into a second lockdown, which is, or maybe regional, maybe national? Have we got a little bit of flexibility that we may go over a week or two on the consultation, or is it just a hard 8 weeks, that's it?
Well, essentially, in the original delivery agreement, we indicated a 6-week set period. Now, we are looking to extend that, and that's why we've said we will consult between January and March, but we haven't specified specific dates. So that gives us a window to adapt the most appropriate consultation period. Obviously, we wouldn't want to extend it too long because that will have further implications on the timescale going forward. And what we is a vacuum almost between the existing LDP expiring and the new LDP being adopted. That we can minimise that. Please. Right, okay. Apologies. So I don't know how much of that you heard. What we're trying to do is to approach this the most flexibly we can. So we do have a window. We're suggesting a window between January and March where we'll go out to consult. If there are circumstances, I mean, heaven forbid if there are further period of lockdown, then obviously the delivery agreement would have to be looked at again. But at the moment, we feel that 8-week periods will just provide that bit more scope to consult with members of the public.
All right, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Gary.
I will got it. Caroline, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question, and through the chair, I am very aware that there's a member of the press here today, and it's a plea to her really that to get the message out, and it's a duty on us councillors as well to get the message out to people in our communities about the importance of this piece of work, because many of the plans that we have to deal with in our committee are many years in the making, and it starts right at this point. So it is a plea to members of the public to become really involved in as much as they can in the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I got no more speakers. Gareth?
Yeah.
Would you like to add anything else, please?
Can I formally move that we the officer's recommendation?
I need a second as well, please.
I'll second it. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that the end of the report, Gareth?
That's the end.
Thank you, Gareth.
So,
moving on to item 10, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Adam, introduction and development viability model, please. And Adam's taken this?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam.
For the purposes of the recording, Adam Prevost, Principal Strategic Planning Officer. So this item is to seek your approval to pilot a development viability model. Planning Policy Wales places great emphasis on assessing development viability before sites are proposed for allocation within a development plan. And the onus is on candidate site promoters and house builders to demonstrate that their sites are viable. For this reason, we have worked collaboratively with colleagues across the South East Wales region to develop a consistent viability model, and this follows the well-received approach used in the Mid and South West Wales region. We now have that model, and it's ready to release to candidate site promoters and house builders as a tool to run viability appraisals and demonstrate whether their sites are deliverable. The proposal is for the model to be released subject to the council receiving payment of a standard fee. This would be tiered depending on the size and complexity of the development, as detailed in paragraph 4.1 of the report. This is consistent with the fee schedule already in use by our regional colleagues in the West, and the fee is intended to cover the council's administrative costs of locking and distributing the model, verifying the completed appraisal, and providing a review to the developer or site promoter. But it's very important to stress that payment of a fee will not serve to guarantee site allocation within the replacement LDP or directly result in the granting of planning permission. The main purpose of the process is to demonstrate whether a proposed development is likely to be viable or not. The recommendation is that the committee authorise consultation with the housing industry to enable testing of the model as a chargeable tool, and then following the outcome of that pilot, the second recommendation is to note that a report will be taken to council to advise of the results, and if deemed appropriate, to request formal adoption of the model and charging structure. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions, please?
Yeah, I have a question, please.
Councillor Bosey, please.
Basically, the fee structure, are we confident that the fees will cover the costs incurred? Looking at the fee structure, it does actually seem quite reasonable, and I just wonder whether it is too cheap, maybe, and that it does really cover the costs incurred. Thank you.
Adam, please. Thank you, Councillor.
That's a good point. We've fallen in line with what's happened in the West Wales region. That's the fee structure that's already in place there. And it's a very limited service. It's basically to run a very high level test of site viability, look at headline inputs, and for us as officers to say, do we feel they're in the right ballpark or not? If we then start entering into more detailed discussions, it might be that we need to employ an independent arbitrator to scrutinise that in more detail. And if that does happen, it will be down to the developer or site promoter to pay for that privilege.
All right, Councillor.
It didn't really answer the question of whether it's going to cover our costs or not. I know you said you used the same level of fees that they used in other areas, but perhaps the other areas are subsidising those fees. The question is, the amount of officer time spent in dealing with it, is it covered by the fee set?
Okay, I think by piloting this over the next few weeks, we'll have a better idea of the amount of officer time that will be required and be able to provide feedback to members on that point.
Could I suggest to the chair then that these fees are for the trial, and that if it is to go, once you've assessed the level of fees, because we're not a charity, and clearly, we need to make sure that the fees represent the amount of work. Yes, for a trial, see how it goes on a limited scale, but what we don't want to end up doing is using valuable resources, to facilitate this. It has to be clearly, wash its face in terms of costs.
Absolutely.
Adam?
No, I think that's a very valid point, and it's something we will assess during the trial and have some more first-hand evidence as to the amount of officer time.
All right, Councillor?
Yeah, that's fine. And obviously, if it goes into use, then the fees must be perhaps, just come back for another quick approval and report to come back and see how it's gone, because it'd be quite interesting to see how it's gone anyway. Thank you, and I do support the recommendation.
Yeah. Adam?
Yeah, I think that's a very sensible recommendation.
I got a question, and I don't know if you or Rodney can answer it. Not legal yet, Rodney. Is this with a 20% increase on his fees, or is that the old price?
Yeah, these will be subject to VAT, so 20% VAT would be applied.
Yeah, but there's a big increase, isn't it? Come.
Yeah, I can answer that one, Chair. I think the
please,
20,
sorry, Ad.
that's okay. I think the 20% you're referring to is the increase in planning fees from the 24th of August. So planning application fees, there's an increase under the legislation in Wales to increase that by 20% across the board. So that comes in the 24th, so in 4 days' time. But this is a different element. So this is dealing with the viability of developments rather than planning application fees.
So you're telling us it doesn't apply to this then, Rod?
No, there's a fee for this service, but it's a different service to the actual planning application fees that are standardised across Wales. But the application fees in Wales, they've increased by 20%. That'll be put in place from the 24th of August onwards. We're still slightly behind England in terms of fees, but we're gradually closing the gap. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rod. I got two more speakers, Councillor Spanzik and Councillor Ken Watts, please. John, please, first.
Thank you, Chair. Great. I like the idea of this development viability model, but I just want to make sure I understand what it's going to do. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but so I take it a developer using this will be 100% clear, 99% clear, on sort of what they will need to provide from community sort of facilities, whether that's play facilities, highway facilities, leisure. So it'll be quite clear to them the costs they have to bear to make a site viable before they even apply. So there's no wriggling out at a later stage or saying they didn't know that. I've got that right, do I?
We'll go back to Adam now. Thank you, John.
Yes, absolutely. That's the whole thrust of Planning Policy Wales now, is that sites weigh up the costs of meeting all of the planning requirements upfront, so that when they're proposed for allocation in the plan, we're confident that they're able to deliver against all of those obligations. So when this model is sent out, it will be accompanied by a user guide and a series of videos to explain how it's to be used. And the developer or site promoter would be expected to calculate the raft of planning obligations that would be needed to make that development necessary and acceptable. And that would be factored in right from the outset, upfront. And the idea is when you then reach planning application stage, you're not really going to be squabbling over any further obligations because that work has been done up front.
Thank you, Adam.
Chair, can I clarify, if it goes back to the point earlier, so I'm assuming, because we can't afford it, it will not include things like litter bins and road grit bins because we can't enforce them through planning? Or is an option for that type of thing to be included?
This would purely be looking at planning obligations as per policy requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, John. Right, Councillor Watts, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just a comment that I wish to make, that I was completely in support of Councillor Voisey's comments, and I was going to put the same question, just that are we underselling our services again? But I think that's been adequately answered now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bosey, please.
Thank you, Ken, for the support. One question which I've just thought of, and it may not be relevant, so apologies, but you mentioned that obviously all the costs of the planning process and everything must be borne by the applicant. Is there anything in terms of the viability of the applicant that has to be proven? So, for example, someone's putting through a development proposal, whether they've got the means or not to actually carry it through, because obviously there's a lot of work involved, and if there's somebody of straw, is it a waste of the council's time and resources, or is that irrelevant at this stage?
Still there, Adam?
Yeah, with that, that's a good point. With the whole process for assessing candidate sites, the site promoter or developer has to provide a raft of supporting information, and that will include things like a master plan and a various suite of technical supporting documents to show that that site can be delivered. The viability assessment will be part of that overall package, but we will then be confident as officers that that site can come forward. If not, it will be unpicked and it will be considered unsound at examination. So there will be a lot of detailed scrutiny of whether a site is deliverable or not before it's proposed for allocation in the plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Councillor Posey. Can I have a move on a second, please?
Move the report.
Second.
All in favour?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. There are no more speakers, is there? Right. Item 11. Any other business?
There's no other matters, Chair.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, all, and I guess. You take care and stay safe.
Chair.
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Bye.
Chair.